Minister, good evening and welcome. Thanks for your time. I'm sure you're very, very busy in this portfolio.
Good evening and hello to all the viewers.
So 100 days, looking back, what would you say you have managed to achieve so far in 100 days?
I think the big achievements for us was at the international level, wrapping up the African Continental Free Trade Area. That's a big one, as well as reaching out for new partnerships with the rest of the world so that we can sell more of our goods. And domestically, because everything starts here at home, getting our basic industries restarted, dealing with the problems that they have, and helping them to become more competitive. So practically speaking, one of the really nice moments was opening Africa's third ever high voltage power plant in Nelson Mandela Bay. You know, this is a huge continent, and it only has two factories producing these high voltage cables, one in Egypt, one year in Gauteng, and now we have a third one in the Eastern Cape. So there are many examples in the last 100 days like that I think points to the issue that we're beginning to lay some solid foundations for the next few months and the next few years.
Okay, so we'll talk about your plan, a very interesting one. We'll talk about the things that particularly excite me, which is clothing, the textile industry, chicken, which is one of my favorites, sugar as well. So let's start with textile, and I see you're going very big on buying local and keeping it local. So what is the plan around the textile industry when it comes to that?
If we look at clothing and textiles as well as footwear, they're a major part of South African consumption. We wear clothes, we wear shoes. We are a highly fashionable industry and country. People love looking different, and of course it's used for basic protection. And whether we buy locally made goods or imported goods makes an enormous difference on jobs locally. Currently, I would say more than half of the clothing that we buy at the stores are imported. Yeah. And that's an opportunity for us. If we can get our competitiveness right, we can significantly expand the industry. So over the last few weeks and months, the 100 days, we've sat down with the clothing industry. We brought into one room the retailers, the manufacturers, the trade unions, and government. And we said, what does it take to significantly change our storyline? Yeah. And the retailers said, we can help. We can commit to increasing the level of local procurement. In other words, we can buy more locally made goods, but we need some changes at factory level. And we then spoke to the manufacturers and the trade unions, and we have the basic outline now of a significant agreement that will enable retailers to buy more locally made goods.
What are some of those changes? What do they want?
So from manufacturers, they want quick response, that when fashion changes, that the industry can rapidly respond to that. You don't need to wait 6 months to place an order and get your delivery. It can be done in 6 weeks or in 3 weeks. From labor, they needed a commitment that the production schedules would increasingly mirror what consumers need, so that workers would work closer to the areas and the times of the year when when consumers buy. Over the Christmas period, by the way, that's the big moment when South Africans go to the shops and buy clothes and kit up for the school year the following year. So those are the kind of things. But at the same time, they also put the spotlight on government. How can we ensure that we don't have such leakage in our border posts that illegal imports flood in? You know, at the end of last year, Yuveka, I should share with you and with the viewers that the landed price of a unit of women's pajamas, in other words, one unit of women's pajamas, was 10 cents. Now, you can't buy women's pajamas anywhere in the world for 10 cents. No. But the declared value is 10 cents, so that there are very little import tariffs that are paid on it. So that's called illegal imports. You depress the price. It's not real. It's really just a false invoice, so that you don't have to pay the price. The landed price for men's woolen suits was under 8 rand. You can't buy the lining and the buttons for under that.
Maybe one button,
Absolutely. So it's fixing these things. It's not a glamorous storyline. It's just getting the basics right that will increase local procurement and South African jobs.
Everybody wins. Everybody, the
Exactly.
consumers, the workers, the manufacturers, the retailers, everybody gets their bit out of this.
And when you do that, that's how you increase your gross domestic product, what economists call the GDP.
Yeah. So poultry, I mean, chicken imports, we had this hoo-ha for many, many years. It's still going on as well. What's your plan around there, especially affordability? We know food is becoming more and more expensive. We did the comparisons of a shopping basket from a year ago to now, and it is insane to look at what more we're paying. So when it comes to like a basic, like poultry and chicken, tell us what you're doing there.
We sat down with the poultry industry shortly after the start of the new administration, and we said to them, what's going wrong in this industry? Why is it that the United States and Europe and Brazil can sell chicken in the South African market at competitive prices? And over the last few weeks and months, we've been working on analyzing and understanding the industry. And we now have a basic sense of what's gone wrong. The first thing is, globally, the poultry industry has changed and South Africa hasn't kept up. So if you look at the United States, every bird is sliced into two parts. The one part is what they call premium meat. It's the breast, it's what they call white meat, and consumers pay a little bit more for it. And then the other one is what they call the discounted meat. It's the meat close to the bone. And so the Americans would get their money, they would make their margin on the premium meat, and they would take the less desirable meat and sell it in South Africa. Our local chicken producers would not be able then to compete against that, because remember, the Americans have now made their money on the premium meat in the US market. So we've said to the industry, let's restructure. You have to look at what's happened globally, and we've got to increase our competitiveness. We brought in one room the importers and the domestic players. They've been at each other. Normally the headlines is the feathers are flying. And we've said to them, let's have a cooperation to try to make South African poultry cheaper. It's a big protein source for South Africans. And we live on chicken. We love...
When you see it as a healthier choice,
It's a healthier choice also. And it's an easy way for small farmers to get into the market. And so it can create many more jobs. So we've got an industry plan now with a range of measures, what government must do to improve what is called the sanitary and phytosanitary standards, so that we can sell our chickens abroad, and what we need to do to improve the price of chicken and the competitiveness of the sector. It goes to issues like, how much do you pay for your chicken feed? How do you ensure that you fetch the premium in export markets and you can produce more cheaply for domestic users?
Okay, so I was just going to ask, it's fine for abroad, but what about the people right here? So
absolutely,
it's going to work for people at home as well.
Because we've got to feed the South African nation. In feeding and clothing the nation, we create jobs.
Yeah. And I suppose, Minister, many will wonder, it's a matter of quality. You know, if it's produced locally, a lot of people, perception is, what's the quality going to be like? Is it going to be good quality? Whereas we buy things made in China because they have flooded the market. They have been flooding the market. So people want to know, if I'm getting this locally, am I getting quality? Is it stuff that's not going to fall apart after 2 or 3 washes? That kind of thing. So I think quality matters to the consumer, to the South African consumer, if it's coming from home. We have our doubts. We can be biased that way in certain instances.
I would say that South African products generally fare very, very well on the quality scale. In fact, we outcompete imports. It's on price that we often found wanting. So we've got to build on quality, but begin to address the price challenge so that we can get the best of both worlds, and we can offer consumers a compelling product, whether it is a car, whether it is a chicken, whether it's a dress.
No, and I must say, I've bought local clothes over the past couple of weeks, and I love them, and the quality and the fit and all of that, and you can see it's worth buying something that's made by South Africans for South Africans as well. Now let's talk sugar, my other favorite. So for how long have we been told now, let's cut back on your sugar, you've got to be healthy, but it seems that the sugar industry is suffering for it.
The government introduced a health levy on sugary beverages, and this was done because a huge intake of sugar is bad for our health. But of course it has an effect on sugar farmers and on workers in the industry. So I met today with the sugar industry. We had a room packed with small growers and large growers and sugar mills and companies that use sugar, whether it's the beverage makers or the big food or the retailers. and we looked at how to turn around the fortunes of the sugar industry. One key challenge that the sugar industry faces is demand for sugar has dropped. So how do you deal with this? You can't get consumers to buy more sugary drinks. The drinks themselves are being reformulated. And so we've got to look at new uses for the agricultural land. So it's bringing nut production in hemp. Hemp is a key product that can actually be used for clothing manufacture. So there you have a nice link between textiles and the areas that we currently plant for sugar. But even in sugar, we're looking at new applications. Can we use sugar as a feedstock, as an input into biofuels? You can make petrol with it, or it is called bioethanol to give it its technical name. You can use sugar to generate electricity, and you can use sugar to make plastic bottles. It's one feedstock into bioplastics. So all of these need to meet a basic economic test, that it's viable and it's sustainable over the long term. And when we can do that, we can begin to tell our story more compellingly. Let me give an example, perhaps just outside of sugar, to illustrate what we can do as South Africans. About a week ago, Toyota announced a major upgrade of its plant in KwaZulu-Natal. And it's invested almost R500 million in bringing essentially the floor of the minibus taxi and the sides of the taxis and localize these. So when we can do something as sophisticated as a car, we should be able to crack the challenges of sugar and poultry and clothing and textiles. So over this 100 days, it's about getting the basics of industry right, but also opening up new markets elsewhere in the world.
Okay, so that's automotive. That's great. Is that creating more jobs, though?
That creates in the case of the Toyota plant, it's 80 new jobs that are being created. And very interestingly, when I walked around in the factory, they use sophisticated technology, smart robotics. They had a robot that does quite a bit of the work. But because we're bringing those products to South Africa, we used to import those entire panels. We're now making them locally. We are creating jobs here. And we're creating jobs in what are essentially high-tech areas.
Yes, and I mean, we have to say it, fourth industrial revolution. You can't have any discussion without it. Now, all of this that you are doing, with that in mind?
Indeed, indeed. And it's
the jobs you're creating, making sure they will survive past that or fit in?
Exactly. So digitization is not a separate part of the economy. You've got to infuse it into clothing manufacture. It comes in on the machine floor. But when you think today, how are people buying clothes? They're doing it online. So the fourth industrial revolution is reshaping retail. Tomorrow it's going to reshape design. You and I will be able to design our own clothes or customize a little bit what's done, and it will be done through 3D printing. So we have to ensure that South Africa is at the cutting edge of the new technology. It comes with problems and threats and the potential to lose jobs, but it also has the potential to create new jobs. And so we've got to be there and do these kind of things to create those jobs.
It's a minefield, and we're going to have to navigate that and see what happens. Even we don't know what jobs are going to be created when that comes around. Now, I have to ask you about the B word, and that's Brexit. So what happens? What's your plan in case there's a no-deal Brexit? What's going to happen and how that will affect South Africa? Have we prepared for that?
We have indeed prepared for it. Most of our exports to Britain at the moment is regulated through an economic partnership agreement with the European Union. And if and when Britain leaves the EU, and it does so without an agreement, the effect would be an enormous blow to South African exports, because the cars we sell, and we sell a lot of cars to the United Kingdom, those cars would immediately attract an import tax. So to prepare for that, we've been talking to the UK, and in this 100 days we concluded an agreement with the UK. It's called an economic partnership agreement, and that would entail South African products getting into the UK market on at least the same terms that we have now. In one or two cases, perhaps slightly better terms, but by and large, come the 1st of November, we would have protected South African jobs and South African investment. And that is part of a bigger trade agenda that includes the African Continental Free Trade Area. in this 100 days, we've also switched on the implementation phase of the free trade area. It will create a new market of 1.3 billion people, which will give us the scale to really ensure that we can grow our economy and deepen our investment levels.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I have to ask you, what is your biggest worry? Which industry worries you the most at the moment?
I think it is manufacturing as a whole, that manufacturing is the foundation of the productive economy. And the African continent as a whole has de-industrialized. South Africa too, the share that manufacturing makes up of our GDP has shrunk over a number of years. So we've got to renew our appetite to have a strong, vibrant and competitive manufacturing sector. And within that, there are two drivers that will reshape manufacturing. You've pointed to one of it, which is the fourth industrial revolution. This enormous change in robotics, in digitization, in 3D printing, in big data, in algorithms, smart algorithms that's reshaping production and consumption. The second big driver is climate change. Increasingly across the world, people are saying, how did you make this product? Did you use a lot of, emit a lot of carbon in the process? So we've got to get South African manufacturing fit for the opportunities of the future. And that means build the green economy, find opportunities in climate change, and bring those technologies to South Africa. When we have solar plants or wind farms, let us make those components locally. And so we're on a major program now to localize the components used in the green economy. And if I may perhaps add one other thing, and that is the creative sector, whether it's drama or film or television.
Turmoil there at the moment.
Or soap operas. Think about it. Soap operas made in Turkey or in Brazil are sold all over the world. It's a product that you export. It's similar to tourism. South Africa is a very creative country, fantastic music, great opportunities in filmmaking. By the way, we've become a significant film location with many of the Hollywood blockbusters filmed here in South Africa.
In Cape Town.
So it's not only Charlize Theron that is a South African film icon, it's also our locations. So it's building those new economies, much as we support and ensure the competitiveness of the base industries of chicken and clothing and steel making and cars.
Take our drama abroad.
Absolutely.
We can extend our drama. I like the sound of that. Thank you very much, Minister Ebro Patel. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. 100 days in office. Done quite a bit already. You must be exhausted.
It's a busy period, but South Africans need jobs.
We need jobs. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time.